Number three, the opposite of faith in God. The opposite of faith in God is not atheism, Paul says. It's idolatry. Let's go back to verse 25 really, really quickly. Verse 25, they exchanged the truth of God for a lie. They exchanged, that's a key word there. Underline it. They exchanged the truth of God for a lie, and they worshiped and served what has been created. Again, maybe their mind, maybe something else, instead of the Creator, who is praised, the one who ought to be praised forever. No person, Paul says, ever quits believing in God. They just substitute something into God's place. You see, we're created so that we exalt something in our lives. There is something we will find that we will begin to treat like God, something that we will depend on, something we will magnify and look to fulfill us and sustain us. Guys like Dr. Ehrman and Sam Harris replaced the majesty of God's intellect. They replaced that with the majesty of their own. Others, maybe less intellectual, neglect God and they look to money or their power or career or sexual pleasure or family to provide security and meaning and permanence to them. And if so, what happens? God becomes uninteresting or irrelevant to them. Let me just ask you, has that been happening to you? It's not that there's been this moment where you just said, I quit believing in God. It's just that over the last few years, God becomes increasingly uninteresting and irrelevant because his place in your life has just been pushed out by your love for all these other things. That's what happens to people. It's been happening, I think, to some of you. But Paul says all these gods, they're false gods that can neither sustain or satisfy you. Money disappoints, or money sprouts wings and it flies away. Relationships disappoint you. Your self-image is going to let you down. You get old and die. Your intellect fails you. Now listen, when people are so confident in what academics or science tells them, I always ask, and listen, I want you to hear this. Please don't misinterpret this. Hear this from somebody who has a PhD. I'm into academics. I love geekery and nerddom, and I love that whole sphere, and I think we ought to have a lot more people going into it. But here's the question I ask. I'm like, okay, has there ever been a generation that you know of that looked back on the previous generations and admired them for their sophistication and wisdom? Ever? No, you look back at your grandparents and you're embarrassed by some of the things they believe. Can you believe they thought that? Can you believe they thought that? Can you believe they did this? And so I asked them, I was like, do you really believe that our generation is going to be the first one where everybody from now on looks back at us and says, wow, man, they had it together. Man, they were wise. Man, they had understanding. I know your grandkids and great-grandkids are going to sit around the Thanksgiving table and make fun of you, aren't they? Can you believe they thought that? Oh, they're such idiots. But we don't say that because we respect them. That's what they're going to say around the table, right? So all I'm saying is I'm not being anti-intellectual. I'm just saying a little humility is in order, and understanding that our intellect is not always the best way to figure out ultimate things of truth. There is another way. And there is another way, and that is a God who is speaking, a God who has never been silent, a God who is there, and a God who says, I'm the way, the truth, and the life. All gods will ultimately disappoint us and fail us because we were created by God, for his glory and his purposes. And when you realize that, you turn your attention toward God. And what happens is you begin to realize that his voice has always been there. It's been speaking to you. It's never been quiet. It's always been calling out to you.